And welcome back to Straight Talk. So just before the break, we were talking about the parking issue and in a bigger picture, the zoning issue. I've sat on different boards, the safety board and that, and they talked a lot about over the years zoning, specifically zoning, and what should go where, but no organization wanted to take that ball and run with it. To say that, okay, we're talking about zoning. We're going to change the word, or we're going to change some, we're going to call it something else, but everybody knows it's zoning. The fire department's the same thing. They wanted to look at the zoning. The police wanted to look at so how do you get around that, or how do you get away from that? Because we have to start, I guess, we're growing, so we have to start looking at other things. But I don't think it should be at the expense of the community, though. When you're looking at stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I think any of that stuff really, you want to look at what makes sense to the community. I'm just curious, what would be from a policing perspective, the interest in zoning?
Well, it's not.
Just give us an
it's
idea.
It's not specifically the zoning for police, but it's to deal with a lot of the issues that are resulting from that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But for instance,
Yes.
what would be an example?
Well, you're talking about, like, for instance, like the road issues. If emergency vehicles passing, or if it's blocking the road, or
Okay.
and then there's an accident, and how does that work out? Because all the roads in the community are still fall underneath the province, as far as the laws are concerned. Even though we have our own municipal laws, the police are going to follow the Quebec Safety Highway Code for everything. Because even though that the municipality makes a law, it falls underneath the Quebec
But
Safety
that's
Highway
part of the
Code.
policing agreement. Am I correct?
Well, I mean, the police fall under the Police Act, so they're underneath the province regardless of anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So they're police as per the province of Quebec, like anybody else. So they still have to follow the Quebec Safety Highway Code for whatever it is. They can give you tickets for everything, but they don't. It's selective. Like the same thing as anything else. Selective policing has been in this community, and it'll probably be here for a long time. Nobody follows the letter of the law because it would be too difficult to do that across the board. There would be too much problems. How many? I'll give you the seatbelt incidents. Or kids standing up in a vehicle and the parents holding them.
You see kids or like teenagers riding in the back of a truck.
Riding in the back of a truck, surfing on the top of the truck, there's a lot of, like, the cars that are supposedly street legal that are on the road, which aren't street legal. They're racing them, and they're running under 10 seconds at the track. A vehicle under 10 seconds shouldn't be on the road, So there's a lot of issues that you have to overlook in some aspects until somebody does something stupid, and then you have to.
Well, like, why would we have to wait until something stupid is happens and someone gets injured or?
Because the outcry of the community, common sense all the time doesn't always play a factor when it comes to that, and then people start bringing up other issues. That it's, now you're turning us into a municipality, you're going into, this is a white man's law, and all those things that come with it and those are all the voters.
Yeah, no,
So,
but there is that. I mean, and people talk about that, and I can understand why some people talk about that. But part of the problem is, though, at least in my opinion, is that by and large we're so gnash your teeth if you want, but we're so far down the road of assimilating in our minds that even affects what's common sense. What I'm saying here is that there are people who say they'll use the tradition, or they'll use the idea of being a nation and that to in a way kind of justify doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And that is a problem. But doesn't negate whether we ought to be there. We ought to be functioning like that. But just say we didn't have, at one point in time, we didn't have a traffic code here. We didn't have these laws, and we didn't have parking restrictions, we didn't have zoning per se, I think at one point, I mean, you come in and you say, is this reasonable to have? Is it reasonable that one person should, endanger everybody? Because that's the thing, I understand, nobody wants a factory in their neighbor's yard, which has an impact on them and potentially on their health and that. And why aren't we more considerate? I mean, the reality is I think we're coming to grips with it. People are, it's happening and people will complain and everything else, but people will still ignore it when they want. I mean, I don't know if that's going to change.
Yeah, and it's a difficult situation for the powers that be, and I'll leave it at that, because it's wider than just the policing and the politicians, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of other things involved in that. But nothing changes until somebody ends up getting hurt, and then even then things don't change.
Yeah.
So it's how do you deal with it with those organizations? You know what I mean? If the police were to crack down 100% on what they should be cracking down, a lot of people would be going up against the police after that for doing their job. And then what's the downfall of that? Then the politicians are going to have to deal with that. Then they're going to say, well, okay, this is acceptable or that's not acceptable. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, somebody came up with this brilliant idea. I don't know who, and I don't know how brilliant it was to allow people to use ATCs, giving them permits to use ATCs if they were going to the dump or if they're doing something, and it's a vehicle that's not supposed to be on the road at all.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing that, it sort of puts them, like the police, in a situation that now they're liable. What happens if an ATC that they gave a permit to hits a vehicle or a kid? Who are you going to blame? Are you going to blame the person driving it? Yeah, but you're going to blame the police for being stupid enough to give them a permit to drive on the roads where a vehicle cannot be on the roads.
But it doesn't exist anymore. The thing about giving out permits to
Yeah,
drive.
but you know what I mean.
And
But,
yeah,
but in that
yeah,
situation,
but the selective enforcement of that has continued to say. I mean, and then it comes up periodically. I mean, a few years back, there was a kid who very nearly took his head off by that trailer by the radio station. I mean, you have issues about kids who are maybe it's hard to tell how old they are, but they ain't very old, and they're driving on the roads. And it sort of people get up in arms about it for a while, and they're concerned about it, and then it relaxes.
but I mean, there's a
go in waves.
But there's a bigger picture. It's hard because if you try to enforce all the law, especially for off-road vehicles, then if you don't know who it is, then the only way you can find out is to try to stop the person. If the person doesn't stop, then you have to pursue
You're
them.
into this
and then
whole other thing.
You're putting everybody else in jeopardy, and it's the winter time. It's worse because the road conditions are bad. There's skidoos driving all over the main roads where normally they wouldn't be doing. So it's a tough job for the police to deal with, and for the community and everybody else. So
I wrote about this issue maybe 2 months ago or something, because Quebec recently wanted to make a law or an act or whatever to ban the use of snowmobiles and then ATVs or ATCs, whatever they're called, between certain hours of the night. So I wanted to know if the peacekeepers are gonna adopt that law here.
if any law is in the whole province, then it's here, but whether or not it's enforced here is another thing. I mean, and with that,
With that, we'll take a break. We'll be back after these messages. Don't go away.